Hey, what's up, everybody? So, once upon a time, I had an interview in a city that was about 100 kilometers away from where I am living. And that was about an hour and 20 minutes drive. So, on the morning of the interview, I got up, put on my suit, got in the car, started driving. And 10-15 minutes into the drive, I got a call from the HR manager. And he was very apologetic and he's saying that, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to cancel for today. The manager couldn't make it to interview you. So, it is frustrating, it is disappointing, especially because it's very last minute, but I get it. Sometimes, things happen, emergencies happen. So I was like, okay, this is fine, we can reschedule. And I went back home. Now, a few days down the line, I was expecting them to call me back or just drop me an email and tell me that we've rescheduled for this appointment, but I didn't hear from them. So I was in a position where I was thinking, should I reach out to them? Should I contact them? Should I ask to reschedule or shouldn't I? What would you have done? In another situation, I went through 7 interviews with one company. 7! Who goes through 7 interviews? Apart from this company, I've never been through 7 interviews. And believe me, I've interviewed quite a bit in my career. I don't know who does 7 interviews. Google, Microsoft, I don't know. And what happened by the end of it is, after the 7th interview, I didn't hear back. They just disappeared. And one thing that happened very early on in my career during one of the interviews is that I was going through this technical assessment where you are presented with an environment. You have to do some pen testing live where somebody is watching you and they're all over you. And there was this cross-site scripting challenge that I couldn't crack. I just couldn't figure it out. And the interviewer started making fun of me. Started pointing at the screen and started mocking me, saying, hey, can you not see this? Why did you miss that? And really being very sarcastic and very snobbish. And after I finished the assessment, he asked me about my salary expectations. Now, in hindsight, now that I think back at it, it was very odd to ask about my salary expectations, particularly that it was clear that he wasn't going to hire me or go forward with the interview. But I didn't know any better back then. So I gave him a number. I told him, this is what I'm making right now. And these are my expectations. And he started making fun of that too. I was like, is this what they're paying you? Really? You're getting paid this much? So the reason I'm sharing all of these with you is because I want to tell you that I've been through quite a bit of interview situations and quite a bit of what I call interview red flags. All of these things and a lot more that I'll be sharing with you in this video are red flags that if you come across, you really want to be very careful who you're dealing with in terms of the company, whether you want to accept their offer or not. And if you come across multiple red flags from one company or one interview process, then you most likely want to walk away from that situation. That's not a company that you want to be working with. So what are some of these red flags? There's a ton, there's a lot. I'm not going to be sharing each and single one of them that I came across, but I'm going to sort of categorize them for you. So the first category is what I call lack of courtesy, or you can also call it bad attitude, right? So that company that canceled last minute, never heard back from them, didn't reschedule, didn't send an email saying, shall we go ahead with another time? That to me is a lack of courtesy. And I actually ended up not emailing them. I decided against sending them an email or contacting them to ask for a reschedule because in my mind I was thinking, look, if they don't have the courtesy to reach out to me when they canceled last minute, to at least apologize and say, look, we're sorry, we're either going to reschedule or the position has been closed or it has been filled or whatever. If they don't have the courtesy to do that, that is probably somebody that I don't want to be working with. So I decided against emailing them and reaching out to them. And I heard a few months down the line that they were going through some rough situations and the company ended up closing. So all is forgiven. Honestly, I'm not holding any grudges. But to me, at least, that wasn't something very nice, not something very courteous. The other thing, and this is one thing that really ticks me off and really annoys me when I see this happening. I see a lot of people, particularly with fresh graduates, with juniors, I see a lot of interviewers treating them badly with bad attitude. What's up with that? They're treating them as if they're doing them a favor by inviting them over to an interview. It's as if they're doing them a favor by sitting with them and interviewing them for a job role. That really gets on my nerves. If you are somebody that mistreats people just because you have a job or just because you think you're a boss or a supervisor or a manager, shame on you. And if you are a candidate that sits through an interview like this and allows somebody to treat you badly with attitude, shame on you too. Get out of there. Nobody's allowed to look down on you. Nobody's allowed to give you attitude, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what position they're in. There's a reason they're interviewing you, because they have a vacancy. There's a need for them that they need to fill. They have to fill. And for you to show up, that by itself is showing quite a bit about your attitude, about yourself. And if they are going to treat you badly just because they are holding a job and they think they're holding this job over their head, that is a huge red flag for me. Get out of there as soon as possible. Under the same category of lack of courtesy or bad attitude is when the interviewer doesn't pay attention to you as the candidate. If you're sitting in the interview and your interviewer is on their laptop or busy with their phone and not paying attention to your answers and not paying attention to the kind of questions that they want to ask you, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, if you as an interviewer, you don't want to pay attention to the candidate, why on earth would you bring them in for an interview? What's the point? They're there for a reason. You asked them to come in. You want them to fill a void that you have. And you need to make sure that they are a good fit. This is for you, interviewers. If you are going to not pay attention and not care for their answers, then there's no point of them being there. Just let them go. Stop wasting their time. And the same goes for you, candidates. If the person across the table from you is not paying attention, you have one of two things to do. You either sort of politely nudge them in the direction of paying attention. You could say something along the lines like, excuse me, it looks like you are busy now. Would you like us to reschedule? Or, excuse me, and I've done this before, by the way. Like, excuse me, it looks like you're busy now, so I'm just gonna be quiet and let me know whenever you want me to continue the conversation. I'd be more than happy to answer your question. 99% of the time, they're going to feel a little bit embarrassed and they will put the phone down or shut the laptop down and they will pay attention to you. If they still give you attitude after that, keep your answers very short, wrap it up as soon as possible and just get out of there. There's no point of you continuing the interview. That is not somebody that you want to be working with. One other thing that falls under the same category of bad attitude or lack of courtesy is if they show up late or if they keep you waiting and they never apologize or they never thank you for waiting. To me, this is unacceptable. It shows a big lack of courtesy and it borders on impoliteness, if I'm being honest. Look, if you as an interviewer don't want your candidate to be late, and if they're late, all hell breaks loose, like, oh my God, how dare the candidate be late? If you have this kind of attitude, why would you be late? Is it because you think that your time is more valuable? Is it because you think that you are more important than them? Is it because that you think that you're in a better position and then you have the right to be late and to treat them badly and let them stay there waiting for half an hour or an hour? If that's the case, then you're not somebody that I want to be working with. And for you candidates, this is the same goes. If somebody keeps you waiting for too long and they give you attitude on top of that, wrap it up. Just answer briefly, be polite, be courteous, get to the point, and just wrap it up and move on. Again, that is not somebody that you want to be working with. And last but not least, under the same category of lack of courtesy, going back to one of my stories when I was being mocked and made fun of in the interview, that is, needless to say, this is one of the biggest red flags ever there is. Actually, there is one that might be a little bit bigger. I'll leave that to the end though. But look, I never followed up with this person. I don't know where they're at in life right now, but I can guarantee you, if they haven't changed anything about their attitude, if they're still the same person that I met 15 years ago, there is no way they've reached somewhere in life, in their career. Because nobody wants to work with somebody like this. Nobody wants to work with a person that makes fun of them, that has this bad attitude, that is mocking, being sarcastic all the time, putting people down. That's just plain negativity all over. There is no other way to say it. Not your colleagues want to work with you if you're like this, not your managers or supervisors, not your subordinates, probably not even your mom wants to work with you if you're a person like this. Get over yourself, man. Get over yourself. get an attitude adjustment and learn how to work with people. And for you candidates, if you face a situation like this, again, that is probably not a person or a company you want to be working with. So that's the first category of red flags. The second category of red flags, I like to call no end in sight. It is an open-ended process. You don't know how long it's going to take. You're probably going to sit for 7 interviews like I did, and then there is no end in sight, and then all of a sudden the company disappears and you never hear back from them. So if you are going through an interview process and you ask questions such as, can you tell me a little bit about the process? How many interviews do we expect to happen? How many people am I expected to be interviewing? And they don't have a clear answer. They don't know what to tell you. Be a little bit careful or push a little bit for some clarity. Because when you are walking into a situation like this, chances are that you're going to be dragged along for a very long process. And this is what happened to me, unfortunately. It was months long. I interviewed pretty much everybody that you can think of. Multiple people on the same level, multiple people on another level, multiple people on the top level, executive level. And it becomes draining. It becomes really frustrating when you have to answer the same questions with the same company over and over and over. Only for them to just, go quiet on you and never hear back from them. So make sure that the process is clear as early on as possible. Another one about no end in sight is, and this falls, by the way, under the general category of unpreparedness. You can think of it this way. Anything that communicates to you that your interviewer is not prepared, this is a red flag. Another example is when the person that's interviewing you, you're asking them questions and they're not prepared to answer. So we talked about this in other videos. You as the candidate, you want to make sure that you're a good fit for the company that you are applying to. You want to ask about the culture, the development, the training program, the career progress, all of these things, particularly if you're a fresh graduate or if you're a junior. These things really matter in the first few years of your career. They matter still later on in your career, but particularly in the first few years, because they give you this boost, not just in knowledge, but in self-esteem and in self-confidence. So when you're asking about these things, if your interviewer is not prepared to answer, they don't have the answers, or worse, they come at you with a bad attitude, and this has happened before. They get offended. They're like, how come you're asking me about these things? So not only are they not prepared, but they're also raising the first red flag, which is they have a bad attitude. Bad attitude and not prepared, this is a formula for you to just walk away. So anything that falls under this unpreparedness is a red flag. Another one is when they haven't read your CV. You walk in as the candidate and you realize that the person that's interviewing you is looking at your CV for the first time. And I've been in interviews like this. I was called in to assist or help in interviewing the candidate from the cybersecurity perspective. And there was another person or persons that are sitting there looking for the first time at the CV of the candidate. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what are you doing? Look, if the candidate comes in prepared and you expect them to be prepared, why are you walking into the interview unprepared? How on earth are you going to know if they're a good fit for you or not? If you haven't been through their profile, you haven't prepared some good questions for them, you haven't gone through what you think their traits are and verified and validated whether they're a good fit for you or not. If you as an interviewer haven't done your homework, you're not gonna know if they're a good fit or not. You're going to be quick to judge, and more often than not, your judgment is going to be misplaced. And for you as the candidate, if you notice and you realize that the person is going through your CV for the first time, this is a red flag. At least for me, this is a red flag. It might not be this huge red flag, but it is, because it communicates that that person that's interviewing you hasn't prepared, hasn't put the time and effort. If they haven't think of it this way. Your first interview is like your first date, right? On the first date, do you want to go not knowing anything about the other person you're going to be dating? Are you going to walk into a blind date? If that's the case, go for it, have fun. But make sure it's interesting. Make sure that you are going to have a nice conversation. Make sure that you're going to find out about the other person. Ask them questions about themselves. Tell them about yourself. If you're not walking into the date with this attitude, it's going to be a terrible first date and they're not going to have a good relationship. The same goes for the first job interview. It's like the first date. The person on the other end of the table, be it the candidate or being the interviewer, they want to find out more about you and they want to tell you about themselves. If it's just communication from one side, the relationship is doomed before it begins. And the last thing that I came across under the general category of unpreparedness or no end in sight is when the direct manager that you should be working under or reporting to is not in the interview. Sometimes this happens. Sometimes they're not available. They're not there. But they should make themselves available at one point in time. If they're not available in the first or second or third interview, at one point in time, they should be available, and you have to, as the candidate, sit down with them and talk to them and get answers to your questions directly from your first point of contact, from your manager, direct manager or direct supervisor. Because this is the person you're going to be working with day in and day out. If they are not going to make themselves available for you during the interview, how do you expect them to make themselves available for you during your career? You, as a fresh graduate or as somebody who's a junior, you absolutely need some kind of mentorship. We all do. I've been in this industry for 15 years. I still have mentors. I still have people that I look up to, and I still have people that I sit down with, have a coffee with, bounce ideas off, get some guidance from. We all do that. But when you are starting in your career, this is crucially important. This is the person that's going to be helping you day in and day out and mentoring you day in and day out and guiding you day in and day out. And if that person is not bothered to show up on your interview, how do you expect them to be bothered to show up every day to help and support you? They have to be there. If they're not there, that is a huge red flag. Another category of red flags is asking too much of the candidate. Now, when you are sitting for a cybersecurity interview, it is often that, particularly if you advance a little bit in your career, it's often that you will be asked to present something. Some kind of presentation, some kind of analysis, maybe do some small project, take a VM back home, pen test it, submit a report. You have to do something to showcase your skills, to show your presentation skills, your technical skills, etc. Maybe a SWOT analysis, maybe a competition analysis, maybe a small project that you write, you code, whatever it might be. As long as it seems reasonable, great, no objections. Sometimes, however, and this is completely down to you as the individual that's being interviewed, as the candidate, sometimes you feel like the person is dumping a whole project on you. It's as if they have a project or they have a task and they don't know what to do with it, and you showed up, you were God sent to them, and they just dumped it on you and they're like, hey, here you go and figure it out and come back to us next week. If it feels this way, you are within your rights 100% to talk them down from this scope, so to speak. If it feels like it's a little bit too much, you're absolutely fine to say something along the lines of, look, I still have my day job and I can dedicate some time to this, but you're asking is a little bit too much. It requires 20, 30, 40 hours, whatever, which I cannot really commit to. If you are still at university, something along the same lines of, I'm still at university, still have to go to my classes, still have projects to do, more than happy to work on this project. Maybe we can, tone it down a little bit or reduce the scope a little bit. Otherwise, you're putting too much stress on yourself. You're trying to do something that is well beyond what you're prepared for or you have time for. And when you show up for the day, when you have to present your finding or analysis or your presentation, chances are you're going to be overwhelmed already and you're going to be overstressed and it's not going to go very well. So don't accept this. It is fine for you to say no in an indirect, nice, polite way. And that was my mistake. That was my mistake when I went with that company through 7 interviews. There was multiple presentations, multiple studies that I had to do for them. And never at any point in time, I decided to stop and ask them, how long is this going to go for? How much more are you going to ask of me? And that was purely my mistake, by the way. I take full responsibility for this and I learned my lesson. And hopefully you're learning lessons from me so you don't do the same mistake. So when you go through something like this and it feels like they are asking too much of you, take a step back and let them know that this might be a little bit too much. And last but not least, probably the biggest red flag that I came across and that I experienced is being oversold. Being oversold is when you sit with the interviewer, you as the candidate, you sit with the interviewer, and they are overselling you on the company, on the team, on what they do. They make it seem like this is the dream job, the absolute heaven of all jobs. Like, join us and you'll be the happiest person on earth. The best company, the best job, the best team. You're going to be working on amazing things. We have chocolate in the kitchen every day for you. Whatever it is, whatever perks, whatever positives they throw your way, they make it sound like it's all rainbows and roses and unicorns. You have to be careful with these things. There are instances when, let's say you're sitting with a recruiter and they are trying to oversell you in a job. And by the way, this is not a dig at recruiters, please don't get me wrong. I worked a lot with recruiters. The first few years of my career wouldn't have happened without recruiters helping me out. Sometimes, like in every profession, you have people that are just after their own benefit, and you have that with recruiters. Some recruiters don't care about what happens to you, they just care about placing you in a job so that they get their commission. So that's from the recruiter's side, and that you learn how to deal with. The worst one is when the interviewer from the same company, not the recruiter, the company employee that's interviewing you, or your employer that is overselling you. Usually this is a red flag because pretty much all the time there's an ulterior motive. See, when that happened to me, I was being oversold in a company. I quit a steady job that I was enjoying with a great manager, and I believed all the hype and I believed everything that they were trying to sell me. And I moved to the other company. Turned out they did the same thing with quite a big number of new employees. They oversold them. They got them in around 6 months or so. They doubled the team, got all these people in. And they were doing this, as we later found out, because they were trying to show that the company is growing rapidly because they wanted to sell it. They had some investors that were interested in the company and they wanted to buy that company. But to buy that company, they had to show them that this is a really strong, steady company with consistent growth. We have, we're adding more and more to our team. And that was the case. They were adding more, but then this is what happened. In less than a year, they doubled the team. And within that year, the team shrunk back to the half. All of these people that they hired within a year or so to double their numbers, to double the team, they couldn't afford to pay. Some of them quit. Some of them were made redundant. And it turned out to be a pretty messy situation. And I was one of the casualties. So it didn't turn out to be a happy ending, unfortunately for me. But that's because I was sold on the hype. I got oversold and I believed the hype. So you have to be very careful, very wary when something like this happens. So to recap, there are a few categories of red flags that if you come across, you have to be very careful. If you come across one red flag, tread carefully, take it easy, investigate a little bit more. If you come across more than one category of red flags, you probably want to walk away. The first one is lack of courtesy or generally bad attitude. The second one is when there is no end in sight, when you are just going through an endless process and you don't know when it's going to end. The third one is if they are asking a little bit too much of you. And last but not least, if you are being oversold. So that's it from me. These are some of the red flags that I've been throughout my career. Some I didn't pay attention to and I had to pay dearly for it. Some I learned to pay attention to. Hopefully you learn from my mistakes. Hopefully you will be able to avoid these bad situations when you see these red flags. And I'm pretty sure that some of you have faced quite a few more that I probably didn't mention. If you do, please share them with me. Please share them with the people that listen and watch these videos, because I'm pretty sure you're going to be helping them out as well. So that's it for today, and I will see you soon in another video.